The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by distant stars that twinkled like tiny diamonds. Through this vast emptiness, a massive fleet of alien warships moved with deadly purpose. 3,000 vessels each, one larger than Earth's biggest cities, glided forward in perfect formation. Their silver hulls gleamed under the light of distant suns, and their weapons bristled with the power to destroy entire worlds. Admiral Dekvar stood tall on the bridge of his flagship, the largest ship in the fleet. His forearms moved gracefully as he studied the tactical displays, while his 6 eyes focused on the small blue and green planet that hung before them like a precious gem against the black void. The world looked so peaceful, so innocent. Would be almost too easy. Admiral, his second-in-command, spoke with reverence. Our scanners show no signs of advanced technology. No space fleet, no orbital weapons, no shield generators. This species appears to be completely defenseless. The chivalrous mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his kind. 47 worlds have fallen before our might. This will be number 48, and perhaps the easiest conquest in our history. A species that cannot even travel between stars poses no threat to the great Vorthan Empire. He had seen this pattern before. Primitive worlds with primitive people, who thought they were safe in their ignorance. They would learn, as all the others had learned, that the galaxy belonged to the strong, far below on Earth. Lieutenant Commander Park Jin-woo sat in the Deep Space Monitoring Station, watching screens filled with data that made his blood run cold. The numbers were beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. Ships the size of Manhattan Island. Weapons that could split continents in half. Energy readings that suggested technology centuries ahead of anything Earth possessed. This is not a drill, he whispered to himself, then pressed the emergency communication button. Earth Defense Command, this is Deep Space Station Alpha. We have multiple hostile contacts approaching. Its estimated time to arrival, 72 hours. The response came immediately. Confirmed, Station Alpha. Admiral Lee is being notified. Admiral Lee Dongmin had been waiting for this call his entire career. He had hoped it would never come, but humanity had not survived this long by hoping for the best. In his office, deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, he looked at the same data that had terrified Lieutenant Commander Park. The numbers were staggering. But Lee had spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. Send word to Dr. Kim, he ordered his aide. Tell her it's time for first contact protocols. Dr. Kim So-young received the call while she was having dinner with her family. She kissed her husband and children goodbye, knowing she might never see them again. As Earth's chief expert on alien life and humanity's top diplomat, she had trained for this moment her entire life. Within an hour, she was in the communication center, preparing humanity's first message to an alien species. The transmission was simple and direct. Unknown vessels approaching Earth. This is Dr. Kim So-young speaking for the people of Earth. Welcome to human space. We seek peaceful contact and mutual understanding. We hope we can find common ground and avoid any conflict. The response came back within minutes, cold and final. Primitive species of the third planet, you have been judged and found wanting. Your world will be added to the Vorthan Empire. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. Lay down any weapons, disable any defenses, and prepare for occupation. This is your only warning. Resist, and your entire species will be exterminated. The transmission ended, leaving only silence in the communication center. Dr. Kim felt her hands shaking as she played the message again, making sure she had understood correctly. There was no room for negotiation, no possibility of compromise. The aliens had made their intentions crystal clear. She immediately called Admiral Lee. Admiral, they're not interested in diplomacy. They want complete surrender, or they'll destroy us all. Admiral Lee was quiet for a long moment. I see. Thank you, Doctor. You've done everything you could. Across the world, emergency meetings began in every major capital. Presidents and prime ministers gathered in secure bunkers, trying to decide how to respond to an impossible situation. Some called for immediate surrender, arguing that humanity had no chance against such overwhelming force. Others demanded that Earth fight to the last man, woman, and child. But in the deepest levels of military command centers around the world, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Projects that had been hidden for decades were suddenly activated. Scientists and engineers who had worked in secret their entire careers finally received the orders they had been waiting for. The aliens thought they knew everything. Oh, about humanity. They had scanned Earth's surface, counted its weapons, analyzed its technology. They saw a species that had barely reached its own moon, let alone the stars. They saw no orbital platforms, no energy shields, no massive space fleets. What they did not see were the secrets humanity had been keeping, the projects hidden in the asteroid belt, the weapons that bent the laws of physics themselves, the preparations that had taken 50 years to complete. Earth had tried diplomacy. Earth had offered peace. Now it was time to show the galaxy why. Humanity had survived every challenge nature had thrown at it. The countdown had begun. The red planet. Mars grew smaller in the view screen as the massive alien fleet swept past it like a storm of metal and death. Admiral Dekvar stood with his forearms crossed behind his back, watching the distant blue dot that was Earth grow larger with each passing hour. The familiar excitement of conquest filled his chest. This feeling never got old, no matter how many worlds he had claimed for the Vorthan Empire. 47 worlds, he whispered to himself with satisfaction. All of them fell within days. Most surrendered without firing a single shot once they saw the size of our fleet. His tactical officer approached with a data pad. Sir, our scouts report no change in the human defensive posture. Still no ships rising to meet us, no weapons platforms being deployed. They appear to be completely helpless. Isekvar's 6 eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. The pattern was always the same. First came the desperate attempts at diplomacy. Then the threats and warnings that meant nothing. Finally, the pathetic last-minute surrender when the primitive species realized their situation was hopeless. The humans were following the script perfectly. Sir, the communications officer called out from across the bridge. We're receiving another transmission from the planet. Already? They must be more frightened than I thought. Put it through the speakers. Let the entire bridge crew hear their begging. The voice that filled the bridge was not what Admiral Dekvar expected. It was calm, steady, and completely without fear. The human who spoke had the tone of someone delivering a weather report, not someone facing the destruction of his entire world. Admiral of the approaching fleet, this is Ambassador Choi Minho, speaking on behalf of Earth's United Defense Council. This is your final warning. You have entered human space with hostile intent and have refused our offers of peaceful contact. We strongly advise you to withdraw immediately. Turn your ships around and leave our solar system. Several officers on the bridge looked at each other in confusion. Where were the tears, the desperate pleas for mercy, the offers of tribute and surrender? The human continued speaking in that same unnaturally calm voice. We are not the aggressors in this situation. We have done nothing to provoke your attack. However, we are prepared to defend ourselves if you continue on your current course. This is your last chance to avoid the consequences of your actions. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Admiral Dekvar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed what he had just heard. In all his years of conquest, no primitive species had ever spoken to him with such confidence. Most were already offering to surrender their governments and hand over their resources. Did they just ... threaten us? The tactical officer asked in disbelief. Dekvar burst into laughter that echoed through the bridge. Threaten us? It's a species that travels in metal tubes powered by chemical explosions? A species that hasn't even figured out how to harness the power of their own sun. They threaten the great Vorthan Empire? His laughter was infectious, and soon the entire bridge crew was joining in. The idea was simply too ridiculous to take seriously. It was like an insect threatening to destroy a starship. Perhaps they have. Some kind of hidden nuclear arsenal, suggested the weapons officer. Many primitive species try to compensate for their technological limitations with crude atomic weapons. Even if they turned their entire planet into a nuclear bomb, it wouldn't Scratch the paint on our shields, Thekvar replied dismissively. No, this is nothing more than empty bravado. They're trying to scare us into leaving because they know they cannot fight us. He turned to his navigation officer, maintained course and speed, began charging the orbital bombardment systems. They want to play games. We'll show them what real power looks like. Yes, sir. Estimated time to optimal bombardment position is 18 hours. But far from Earth, in the cold darkness of the asteroid belt, a very different kind of preparation was taking place. Chief Engineer Kong Hajin floated in her environmental suit outside one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets. The structure. Before her was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in complex arrays and generators that had taken decades to build. Final systems check complete, she reported into her helmet communicator. All gravity well generators are online and responding normally. Power levels are at maximum capacity. The response came from Admiral Lee Dongman himself, speaking from Earth's hidden command center. Excellent work, Engineer Kang. How many nodes do we have active? 47 primary nodes, sir, with backup systems for each. We can create gravity wells anywhere within a sphere encompassing the entire inner solar system. The alien fleet is already within our engagement zone. Understood. Are the calculations verified? Kong Haijin checked her instruments one final time. The mathematics involved were so complex that it had taken Earth's most powerful computers months to work out the precise positioning and timing required. One small error could send the gravitational effects careening out of control, potentially, destroying Earth itself. All calculations triple-checked and verified, sir. The system is ready for activation on your command. Let's hope they reconsider their position. I'd rather not have to demonstrate what humans are capable of when we're pushed too far. But even as he spoke, Admiral Lee knew the aliens would not turn back. They had dismissed humanity's warning with contempt, just as they had probably dismissed the warnings of 47 other worlds. The difference was that those other worlds had not spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment. The alien fleet continued its steady approach toward Earth, completely unaware that they were flying directly into the most sophisticated trap ever devised by human ingenuity. In 18 hours, the galaxy would learn that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons or its courage, but its ability to plan for the impossible. The gas giant. Jupiter grew smaller behind them as the Vorthon fleet continued. It's relentless. Advanced toward Earth. Admiral Dekvar stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display with the confidence of a predator closing in on helpless prey. The massive planet had been their last major landmark before reaching the humans' pathetic little world. Status report, he commanded, his forearms clasped behind his back in a gesture of complete authority. All ships maintaining formation, sir, reported his fleet coordinator. No signs of human resistance. Their homeworld appears to be completely defenseless. Dekvar's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. This was exactly how he preferred his conquests to unfold. Clean, simple, and without any unnecessary drama. The humans had made their choice when they ignored his generous offer of surrender. They would face the consequences of their foolishness. Sir, the sensor operator suddenly called out, his voice carrying a note of confusion. I'm detecting some unusual gravitational readings near the asteroid belt. Dekvar barely glanced at the display. Mining operations, most likely. These primitive species always scatter their industrial facilities across multiple locations. A species that still uses chemical rockets couldn't possibly have developed anything that would concern us. The sensor operator studied his instruments more carefully. The readings are quite strong, sir. Much stronger than typical mining equipment would produce. Irrelevant. Dekvar dismissed with a wave of one hand. Even if they've somehow learned to harness basic gravitational manipulation, their technology is centuries behind ours. Continue the advance. But as the fleet moved deeper into the asteroid belt, something impossible began to happen. The lead squadron of Vorthan warships, each one a kilometer long and bristling with weapons capable of destroying cities, suddenly stopped moving. Not slowed by enemy fire, not damaged by some hidden weapon, but simply stopped as if an invisible wall had appeared in front of them. Captive X-Star. Report, Dekvar commanded, opening a channel to the lead ship. Why have you stopped your advance? The response came back filled with panic and confusion. Admiral, we're not stopped by choice. Our engines are at full power, but we cannot move forward. Something is holding us in place. On the bridge of the flagship, alarm klaxons began to sound. The tactical display showed the lead ship struggling against some unseen force, their engines glowing white-hot with effort but achieving nothing. What's happening? Barr demanded, his confident demeanor cracking for the first time. That's when the gravity wells appeared. They began as small distortions in space itself, barely visible ripples in the fabric of reality. But within seconds, they grew into massive artificial singularities, each one precisely positioned around different sections of the alien fleet. The space around the Vorthan ships began to bend and twist in ways that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. Impossible, breathed the science officer, staring at readings that made no sense. These aren't natural gravitational anomalies. Someone is creating them artificially. Ships that had conquered 47 worlds found themselves trapped like insects in amber. The gravitational fields were so precisely calibrated that the vessels couldn't move forward or backward. They were held in perfect stasis, their crews helpless to escape. Emergency power to engines, the Begvar ordered desperately. Break free of whatever this is. But the ships remained motionless. The gravity wells had been positioned with mathematical precision, creating a three-dimensional cage that no amount of brute force could break. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a command bunker that had been carved from solid rock, Tactical Officer Han Wujin watched the engagement unfold on massive displays that showed every detail of the battle. Banks of computers calculated gravitational fields in real time, adjusting the artificial singularities with perfect precision. All gravity well generators online and functioning normally, he reported to Admiral Li Dongmin. The alien fleet is completely contained within the kill zone. They cannot advance or retreat. Admiral Li stood before the main display, watching 3,000 enemy warships struggle uselessly against humanity's trap. His expression was grim but determined. This was not a moment for celebration. This was the moment when humanity had to prove it could defend itself against the darkness of space. Have they attempted to surrender? He asked quietly. No, sir. They're still trying to break free through brute force. Li nodded slowly. Humanity tried to warn them. We gave them every opportunity to turn back. They chose to continue their attack on our world. He turned to the weapons control station, where Chief Engineer Kong Haijin was monitoring the gravitational field generators. Are all systems ready for the final sequence? Yes, sir. All 47 nodes are responding perfectly. The calculations are holding steady. Admiral Li took a deep breath. The trap that had taken 50 years to build, involving the greatest minds in human history and technology that pushed the boundaries of physics itself, was about to be sprung. In moments, the galaxy would learn that humanity was not the helpless prey the aliens had assumed. Begin the sequence, he ordered quietly. The command was relayed instantly to the hidden installations scattered throughout the asteroid belt, across millions of kilometers of space. Gravity well generators that had been humanity's greatest secret began to execute their final terrible purpose. The most powerful fleet in galactic history was about to discover that humans had been preparing for this moment for half a century. The death of the most powerful fleet in galactic history began with a sound that no one could hear in the vacuum of space. It was the sound of metal screaming as gravitational forces beyond imagination began to tear apart ships that had seemed invincible just moments before. Admiral Ekvar watched in horror as his lead ships began to change shape. The sleek warships that had struck fear into the hearts of 47 worlds were being stretched and compressed like clay in the hands of an angry god. The gravitational fields that held them were no longer just trapping them, they were destroying them. Report. He screamed at his science officer, but the alien's response was lost in the chaos that had erupted across the bridge. Warning lights flashed red, alarms blared, and the ship's artificial gravity flickered as competing forces pulled at the massive vessel. Sir, the gravitational fields are increasing in strength. The science officer managed to shout over the noise. They're not just holding us anymore, they're crushing us. The first ships to die were the smallest ones. Vorthan destroyers that had burned cities to ash found themselves compressed into balls of twisted metal in less than 30 seconds.
Ow.
The crew inside had no time to scream before the crushing force of artificial gravity turned them into nothing. More than atoms scattered in space, larger ships lasted longer, but not by much. The mighty Vorthan cruisers, each one capable of destroying a continent, began to stretch like rubber bands as tidal forces grabbed opposite ends of their hulls. The metal groaned and shrieked as it was pulled beyond its breaking point. Then, with sounds like thunder, the ships tore apart completely, spilling their contents into the void. Emergency power to shields, Admiral Dekvar commanded. But his engineers were already working desperately to save their ship, the flagship's shields, designed to withstand the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, flickered and failed under the impossible stress of the gravitational attack. Some ships tried to escape by firing their engines at full power, but the gravity wells had been positioned with perfect mathematical precision. Ships that tried to flee found themselves caught in gravity slingshots that hurled them toward the sun at incredible speeds. Their crews had just enough time to realize what was happening before they were incinerated in the star's nuclear fires. The communications officer called out, his voice filled with terror. "We're receiving a transmission from the human planet." "Put it through," Dekvar ordered, though he could barely stand upright as his flagship began to buckle around him. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and measured, completely unlike the panic that filled the Vorthon bridge. "Admiral Dekvar, this is Admiral Lee Dongmin of Earth Defense Command. We tried to warn you. We offered you the chance to withdraw peacefully. You chose to ignore our warnings and attack our world." The human paused, and in that silence, Dekvar could hear the sounds of his ship dying around him. Metal beams snapped like twigs. Hull plates tore away and spun into space. The artificial gravity that had kept his crew standing failed completely, leaving them floating helplessly in the air. "You should know," the human continued, "that humanity doesn't fight fair. We don't fight for glory or conquest. We fight to survive. When we fight to survive, we use every advantage we can find." Admiral Dekvar tried to respond, but his communications system had already failed. His flagship, the pride of the Vorthan military, began to collapse in on itself as the competing gravitational fields tore it apart from the inside. He had just enough time to understand that he had made a terrible mistake before his ship imploded completely. The destruction was total and absolute. In 3 minutes and 47 seconds, 3,000 warships that had terrorized the galaxy were reduced to scattered debris. Ships that had seemed invincible were turned into cosmic dust. The most powerful fleet in galactic history simply ceased to exist, deep in Earth's command bunker. Lieutenant Yusubin watched the tactical display as the last enemy contacts disappeared from the screens. The readings were clear and undeniable. "All hostile contacts eliminated, sir. 0 human casualties. Mission complete." Admiral Lee Dongmin stood quietly for a long moment, looking at the display that showed only empty space where the alien fleet had been. There was no celebration, no cheering, no sense of victory. What they had just done was necessary, but it was not something to be proud of. "Shut down the gravity well generators," he ordered. "Begin cleanup operations." "Yes, sir." "Should we recover any survivors?" "There are no survivors," Lee replied quietly. "Begin preparations for the notification to the Galactic Council." Within an hour, Earth's message was transmitted across the galaxy through quantum communication networks that reached every civilized world. The message was simple and direct, carrying no threats or boasts, just a statement of fact. The Vorthan Armada ignored our warnings and attacked human space without provocation. They have been neutralized using defensive measures. Earth remains open to peaceful contact with any species that approaches us with peaceful intentions. The message included sensor recordings of the battle, showing exactly how the mighty Vorthan fleet had been destroyed in less than 4 minutes. Across the galaxy, species that had planned to follow the Vorthan's example quietly abandoned their invasion plans. Humanity had sent a clear message to the stars. Earth was not helpless. Earth was not defenseless. And Earth was not to be underestimated. The news traveled faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every civilized world in the galaxy. Within hours of the Vorthon fleet's destruction, the impossible story was being told in 1,000 different languages across 1,000,000 different worlds. The mighty Vorthon armada, conquerors of 47 worlds, had been completely destroyed by a species that had never even left their own solar system. 1,000 warships reduced to cosmic dust in less than 4 minutes. The most powerful military force in galactic history, wiped out by creatures who still used chemical rockets to reach their own moon. On the planet Zephoria, Admiral Keltathon was reviewing invasion plans for Earth when his aide burst into his office with the news. "Sir, you need to see this transmission from the Sol system." Keltathon watched the sensor recordings in stunned silence. Ships being crushed by artificial gravity, fleets being hurled into the sun, the pride of the Vorthon military imploding, like a collapsed star. When the recording ended, he quietly ordered his aide to cancel the invasion preparations. "Send word to the fleet," he said softly. "We're returning to home space immediately." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The hegemony of worlds, which had been assembling the largest invasion force in their history, suddenly found urgent reasons to redirect their ships elsewhere. The Stellar Dominion, famous for their aggressive expansion policies, announced they were entering a period of peaceful exploration instead. But not all species responded with fear. Many saw opportunity in the chaos. Dr. Kim, Sol Young, had barely finished her morning coffee when the first diplomatic message arrived. Then came the second, then the third. Within 6 hours, her office was flooded with communications from species across the galaxy, all desperate to establish peaceful relations with humanity. "Ma'am," her assistant Lee Min-young said breathlessly, "we've received 43 requests for diplomatic contact in the last hour alone. They're all offering trade agreements, technology exchanges, and mutual defense pacts." Dr. Kim rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of humanity's new position in the galaxy. "Set up a priority system. Handle the closest species first, then work our way out." In the military command center, communications officer Park Ji-hoon was dealing with a different kind of flood. His console beeped constantly as new messages arrived from across the known galaxy. "Admiral Lee," he called out, "we're receiving 17 separate surrender transmissions. The Calaxian Empire is offering to pay tribute. The Nexus Coalition wants to become our vassals. The Rimworlds are begging for mercy and offering to give us 3-star systems." Admiral Lee Dongmin looked at the list of species trying to surrender to humanity and shook his head in amazement. "Send them all the same response. Tell them we're not conquerors. We don't want their tribute or their star systems. We just want to be left alone to live in peace." "Sir," some of them are insisting, "the Calaxians have already sent a fleet carrying gold and precious metals. Then tell them to turn around and go home. We didn't destroy the Vorthon fleet to become galactic overlords. We did it to protect our world." The message that went out to the galaxy was simple and direct. Earth wanted nothing more than to be left in peace. Any species that approached with peaceful intentions would be welcomed. Any species that came with hostile intentions would meet the same fate as the Vorthons. But the galaxy had learned more than just humanity's military strength. They'd also learned that humans kept their word. When the first diplomatic envoy arrived from the Centauri Republic, they were greeted with genuine warmth and hospitality. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges were arranged, and a new era of cooperation began. When the Rigel Syndicate tried to test humanity's defenses with a small probe fleet, they received a polite but firm warning to withdraw. They ignored the warning. Their ships were destroyed just as efficiently as the Vorthon fleet had been. The galaxy learned quickly. Humans were not bluffing. They were not weak. And they were not interested in conquest or expansion. They simply wanted to be left alone to live their lives in peace. Years passed, and the story of the Vorthon Armada became legend. On the Vorthon homeworld, where the survivors struggled to rebuild their shattered civilization, the tale was told as a warning to future generations. What happened to our great fleet? young Vorthon students would ask their teachers. They ignored humanity's warning, the elders would reply solemnly. They thought the humans were weak and defenseless. They thought their own strength made them invincible. They were wrong on all counts. Never make that mistake.
Ow.
The story spread to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity became known as the species that didn't start fights, but always finished them. The species that offered peace with one hand while holding unimaginable destruction in the other. Earth continued its quiet existence at the edge of the galaxy. But now the stars knew the truth. Humans were not the aggressors, but they were the survivors. They had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, plagues, and wars in the hostile environment of their own world. When faced with extinction from the stars, they had survived that too, and sometimes in a galaxy full of predators and conquerors. Being the ultimate survivor was the most dangerous thing of all. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it now had one cardinal rule that every species understood. Earth was not to be threatened. Ever.